Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Matt Ewald. I serve the Texas Tribune as Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. Welcome to those joining us in person here in San Antonio and those joining us online this afternoon for our conversation with State Senator José Menéndez, Democrat of San Antonio, as part of our Inside the Interim series, looking at priorities for the upcoming 2025 legislative session and what it means for San Antonio residents. State Senator Menendez will be in conversation with the Tribune's politics reporter, James Barragán, who has been our host for these Inside the Interim conversations in recent weeks. Our program will run an hour with 45 minutes for conversation and 15 minutes for your questions. Here in San Antonio, we do have a mic stand right over where my colleague Rob is for our in-person audience. Our virtual audience can also submit questions online at our Q&A portal. That's at texastribune.org/ask, texastribune.org/ask. We are grateful for the support of our sponsors. Our major sponsors are Raise Your Hand Texas, Texas AFT, Methodist Healthcare Ministries, Texas Association of School Business Officials, Texas State Technical College, the University of Texas at San Antonio, and CPS Energy. Though corporate sponsors and donors underwrite this event, they play no role in determining the content, speakers, or line of questioning. We also want to thank our host, Alamo College's district. Here to offer a welcome is Priscilla. Here to offer a welcome is Priscilla Camacho, Chief Legislative, Industry, and External Relations Officer for Alamo College's district.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you so much. So great to see a fabulous crowd here on this Tuesday afternoon. Again, my name is Priscilla Camacho, and I serve as our Chief Legislative, Industry, and External Relations Officer here at the Alamo Colleges District. And on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Mike Flores, we really are proud to partner with Texas Tribune on this wonderful event and conversation with our Senator, of course, José Menéndez. I did want to spend 60 seconds, if you mind, just giving a few facts, because we're really proud of the work that we're doing across the Alamo Colleges District. For those of you know, we are based here in Bexar County, but we serve 7 other counties around the region. We're very proud of being such a urban and rural and suburban serving community college district. We have 79,000 students matriculating across the Alamo Colleges, our 5 independently accredited colleges, and our 8 training centers. And so we are big and we are diverse. We have a lot of students who are part-time students. We have 14% of our population that are student parents. We have proudly, thank you to the support of Bexar County voters and others who have been supportive of Alamo Promise, we have over 12,300 students, Alamo Promise students at the Alamo Colleges. And so that is incredible work thanks to your partnership and your support of what we're doing. And last but certainly not least, we just celebrated Veterans Day, but you did want to mention that we do serve about a little under 7,000 veteran-connected students. So veterans and their families proudly throughout the Alamo Colleges. And so we are very proud of the work that we do across the community. We are proud to serve all. We are made for all and made for everyone. And so we thank you. If you have any questions, you can see a lot of web information. You can call me or contact myself or Christy White, who is our Chief Marketing Officer here at the Alamo Colleges District, to learn a little bit more about what we do. But with that, I'm going to turn the program back over to our friends at the Tribune, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. We also want to thank those around the state who make the journalism of the Tribune, including events like this one, possible by becoming Texas Tribune members. To learn more, to become a member, you can visit texastribune.org/support. And as we look toward the start of the 2025 legislative session, I also want to call your attention to an upcoming symposium, a preview of the 2025 legislative session happening in Austin at UT's Thompson Conference Center and online Wednesday, December 4th. We'll hear from newly elected officials, old guard incumbents, and other Capitol insiders on what's ahead and what it will mean for Texans. You can learn more at texastribune.org/events. We're here in San Antonio, and I know many folks here don't necessarily need an introduction, but I want to introduce State Senator Menendez, Texas State Senator serving District 26 since 2015. The son of immigrants, Menendez grew up working at his family's small business located in San Antonio's West Side. He began his public service career in 1997 when he was elected to the San Antonio City Council District 6 office, representing the city's West Side, then elected to serve as state representative for House District 124 in 2000. And among the issues he declares as his top priorities are improving the state's public education system, utilities and energy infrastructure, as well as housing and economic development. Our moderator, James Barragán, is a politics reporter for the Tribune with a focus on accountability reporting. Prior to joining the Tribune, James worked as a State House reporter for the Dallas Morning News and had previous stints at the Austin American-Statesman and the Los Angeles Times. I thank the Senator and our audience for being here in San Antonio and those joining us from around the state this afternoon. And with that, I turn the program over to James.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Senator, for being with us. And thank you to our gracious hosts. We've got about 45 minutes to discuss here, and then we'll have 15 minutes of audience questions. So I want to just get into it and talk about the most recent thing in mind, which is the results of the November elections. Obviously, major Republican wins from top to bottom. At the top, of course, President Trump will be back in office in the White House, and I want to talk a little bit about what that means for Texas, but also at the local level, Republicans again showing their dominance, including in some races here in San Antonio that were targeted. So just to start off with, can you sort of give the lay of the land of how you see it, what happened in these elections, and how that might impact the next legislative session, which of course starts in January?
So, first of all, thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming down. To all of our friends in the room, thank you for joining us. Tuesday night was a tough night. It was a really hard night. A lot of us had worked hard. At the end of the day, I think that we've heard a lot about what happened. But I think we have to we always want to focus at the micro level, at the local level, which is important, but we also need to pull back a little bit and look at the lens from a macro perspective and see that over the last few years, ever since COVID, there's been a shift to the right, a conservative shift, an anti-immigrant shift, somewhat of a parochial shift, people worried about their kitchen table. You know, we hear a lot about the price of eggs and gas and these sort of things. And it's frustrating to some extent because while these things are critically important, we cannot diminish the importance of someone's ability to get through the grocery store line and be able to know that they can afford what they need to take care of their families. That is fundamental. By the same token, we cannot be giving away the most important things that democracies depend on, which in many ways free and diverse, accessible education, starting K through 12, moving on to higher education. An educated population ensures a strong democracy. Free and fair press, access to scrutiny, so that people can see and know what the truth is. These are things that are critically important, and these are things that many of us felt were hanging in the balance. And so I'm concerned, but it doesn't mean that the work stops. The work does not end. It just means we redouble our efforts, and we need to educate the community. It's interesting. I'm hearing a lot of people starting to say they didn't understand how tariffs worked and what those tariffs will mean, and how those will impact their decisions to purchase things or not purchase things. So the other thing will be what will be the realistic approach to immigration that will or won't be taken, because if the Trump administration tries to follow through on some of the rhetoric that it was saying, I think it will have a disastrous impact on agricultural, on food prices at the grocery store, on home building prices, on you name it, hospitality industry, on so many things that you'll see I think a backlash. And so I think hopefully the rhetoric, the practical application won't be as bad as the rhetoric was.
Okay, you mentioned immigration, and I do want to get into that. But before, I want to stick a little bit more on the elections. Two things that I heard you mention. One is people's struggles with the economy, and they're real or perceived, and how much the price of eggs is, how much the price of gas is. That seemed to be a very real concern. On the other hand, there were people also, another thing that you mentioned was people concerned about democracy hanging on a thread with things like free education, free speech, the free press. And what it looked like to me is that one of those messages won out over the other. Particularly here in Texas, is there anything that, Texas Democrats have been in the minority party for a while now. I think you've spent most of your career in the minority. Is there a shift in messaging that needs to happen from Democrats? Obviously, there's been a lot of tumult, both at the top of the state party and here locally as well more recently. But is there a shift that needs to happen?
I think it would be a fool's errand to take the bait. I think sometimes there's political bait put into the water to see if you're foolish enough to run with that and bite. So I think we have to once again go back and make sure people do understand we are still the party who believes in the working class families. We are still the party who's concerned about these things. A woman's right to her own reproductive choices, her own body, her own health care. All of these things are still critically important, but I think we have to make sure that people understand that we also care about that people should be able to have a dignity in the workplace and have the ability to have a job that allows them to feed their family, to get an education, to advance, regardless of what neighborhood they're born into, regardless of what community they're born into. So it's our job to get back to that, but it doesn't mean you abandon your base in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean we turn our backs on people. We continue to be the party that welcomes people, and regardless of who they love, regardless of who they want to marry, regardless of who they pray to or don't pray to, we have to continue to be the party that welcomes everyone and understands that we're here to work together with everybody. I think there's going to be a lot of disenchanted voters who are going to see they didn't get what they thought. They're going to have their buyer's remorse, and I think they're going to come back. But at the same time, we have to continue to work and can't give up. I don't believe we change the message. I think we fine-tune the message. We make the message a little bit more specific to the struggles that they're going through. But it doesn't mean that we're going to give up on talking about respecting a woman's right to choose or respecting the fact that people should be able to love who they love and marry who they want to marry.
What do you make about the conversations about Republican gains in Latino communities and in South Texas? They are speaking pretty happily about that. And to be fair, they've invested a lot of time in those communities over the last at least a decade, certainly more. But what do you make of that? I mean, is this part of the similar wave that you and I were talking about in the back? Obviously, the Trump at the top of the ticket colors a lot of this. But what do you make of that? Because if Latinos are suddenly going to the Republican side, that makes things even more difficult for Texas Democrats in particular.
Sure. There was a national, you could see the national playbook on the Republican side of the agenda was to scare people. Having a grown size football player tackling a little girl, on television. These are things to scare people. This has been a playbook they've been running for a long time.
You're talking about the transgender ads, or
yes?
Okay,
and that's been a national. That you could look almost at every campaign across, whether it was a local state rep race, a U.S. Senate race, they're saying the same thing. You know, whether people had ever been in office, they were saying that this person's for, you know, boys beating up on little girls in sports or doing, you know, they were stretching the truth, but it was all of this fear factor, this outrageous stuff. You know, talking about open borders. I mean, they've polled well enough to say, okay, these are the things that poll really well, and we're going to use this against everybody. At some point, you know, Trump no longer has any excuse not to fix the border if he wants to fix it however he thinks he should fix it. He's got control of both, you know, obviously his administration and the legislative branches and to some extent the judiciary. So let's see what excuse he comes up with now to not fix the border. I mean, we know he worked actively to kill the bipartisan bill that we had that was going to address the border. Now, what are you going to do? Because, I mean, that's their number one thing that they like to run on, that there's an open border and that all Democrats want an open border. Okay, now put up or shut up.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly on attacks on transgender people and whether transgender kids should be playing in sports or even adults now, it extends to adults as well. It certainly is one of Republican operatives' favorite messaging. I think you're right on immigration. It is also a favorite message of theirs because it's sort of easy to understand. And I think we did kind of see that in this election. But I guess, again, to the question of, for Democrats, if you want to win back the state, is it a matter of, you're saying there's going to be buyer's remorse and people are going to come back and say, well, that wasn't what we wanted 4 years ago. So is it just a matter of waiting, or is there also something there? Because, I mean, I was in the border a lot, and there were people concerned who had voted Democrat, and they were concerned about, and they talked about the word chaos, and not in the way that sort of you hear in Fox News, but about some of the things that you all have experienced here in San Antonio. There are a lot of migrants, and that does strain the local resources, and then the local officials are strained. And so is there something there that there does need to be, I don't know, a figuring out about how to talk about this?
Yeah, I think that you need to show people what orderly immigration means, right? I think you have to have, we've always had orderly immigration. And if you have, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, this country had a Braceros program where people didn't have to come in illegally. They knew they could come in for 6 to 8 months with a worker's permit. They would work, they'd go back, and they would do so legally. They wouldn't pay any coyotes to bring them in. So it would avoid the whole criminal transactions, the human trafficking aspect of all of this. There is a way to fix this and do this, but you have to have cooperation. You have to want to fix it. I am convinced that there has been an opportunity to fix it, that people have chosen not to take that opportunity. I think it is the best political football they've ever had, and this trope on the immigration is the best way to scare people into voting a certain way. And then you just tie it to certain things. You tie it to, they're going to take away your guns, they're going to take away your jobs in the oil field, and then they want to make sure that they kill all your babies. This is if you take this to the extreme, that's what they start making people believe. And so I think that we need to just be level-headed, common sense, and working local elections. We should be working with people who the best place to train for elected office is at the local level, whether it be a school board, whether it be a city council, whether it be a county commissioner. At the local level, you're helping solve problems that aren't partisan. You really have to work hard to bring people together. And you have to you can't sit there and stick your head in the sand and not talk to half of the people. Because if you look at the way the country voted, even the country, the analysis are coming back on the popular vote. They say it's one of the closest elections we've had in history on the popular vote. So what does that mean? Half the country felt one way, and half of the country felt the other, at least the population. So we have to we should try to reach out to work with everybody. And I'm convinced that if you look at the electorate as a spectrum, 20% of the people will never vote for you no matter what. They're just not listening. They don't like you, et cetera. 20% are always going to be with you. They're your relatives, your friends. You know, they know you, with you. It's that 60% in the middle that are listening, that are objective, that are trying to understand what it is, the policy position that you're taking, and they are the ones that we need to be talking to.
Okay, let's talk about the session. And since we're talking a little bit about immigration and the political football that it's become, I do want to talk about that because we've spent billions of dollars at this point on border security, on Operation Lone Star, I think to mixed results, honestly. There are obviously less people coming through, but if they're not coming through the state of Texas, there's still several other southwestern states that they can come through, not to mention the toll that it's taken on some of the service members in the National Guard. And so I want to ask, with President Trump back in the White House, Republican Congress, it would seem the common sense thing to do for the state of Texas to pull back a little bit on some of that funding, because what they've been asking for since a Democratic president is for the federal government to fill in, or they've been saying that they're filling in where the federal government is failing. I don't know that that's actually going to happen, and you've got a smile on your face, and it seems like maybe you don't either, but I wonder if that is the logical thing to do, and whether you think that that's actually going to happen.
I was looking for the number to try to find the exact number, but I believe over the last 10 to 12 years, I think we've spent close to $20 billion of Texas taxpayer dollars. What could we do with that $20 billion? You know, last session, I could not, in good conscience, vote for the budget. And I've only voted against the budget a handful of times because that's the document that's the one bill we have to pass. It's the one bill that says this is what we believe that we've met our moral obligations. And we had a $33 billion budget surplus, 32.7 to be exact, above and beyond the money we needed to meet our obligations. Did we do one extra penny to give a teacher a pay raise? The answer is no. Did we do anything extra to come up to the inflation-adjusted number to meet what it costs to educate a child in Texas? The answer is no. Did we provide any money to improve our foster care system? If you go to an HEB and go look at a bag of chips, HEB has a computer system that can tell them from the moment that bag of chips hit the back dock of the store to the moment it gets checked out. They know where that bag is. Texas has had probably millions of kids go through its foster care system, and we can't identify where they are. We lose track. I've asked for $10 million just to fix that, and they can't do that. So, you know, we've done some things, but we have not met our potential. That budget has not met its potential. And then wasting $20 billion of Texas taxpayer dollars on the border. So your answer was, should we? Yeah, it's time for us. I've said in the past, send a bill to the feds. Send the bill. If they don't want to do it, and this is what you think is going to make things safer, see if they'll refund you. They'll compensate us for what we spent. And then let's see what we can do to take care of everyday needs of Texans' needs. We need to bring up, we're paying schools based on an average daily attendance, right? We should be paying them on enrollment numbers because they have to hire teachers based on how many kids enroll at the beginning of the year. They issue contracts. Their costs aren't variable daily, but their payment is being made variable daily by the state. We could fix that. We could do so much as a state to provide the future Texans a state that will have an educated workforce, a state that will have people who are prepared for whatever businesses we want to bring in, and not be faced with the tragic situations like when Toyota came to Texas, here to San Antonio, this region, and they had to bring in people because they couldn't find enough people that had the educational requirements to employ. That's a tragedy.
All right, so you're getting ahead of me and going into education already, but it sounds like you think that the state will continue to spend money, these hundreds of millions of dollars, these billions of dollars on immigration for the next biennium.
You know, it's a big thing. They've created that last session, $64 million for the new border workforce, the new Texas border force. They increased the DPS budget for Operation Lone Star by $770 million last session. I don't know. I hope that they have enough. I hope they've said this is enough, but maybe they do come back with more. I mean, we did create some positive things with some homestead exemption increases that provide some relief to Texans who are feeling like they're having to rent their home rather than own their home. We need to make any kind of tax relief should be based on the taxpayer, the homeowner, and if somehow we could figure out a way to get some relief to the renter, that would be good as well.
Okay, let's get to education because I know you want to talk about it. I think some people in the room want to hear about it. The main thing, obviously, is that given the results of the elections, there is momentum for school voucher legislation, school choice legislation, whatever you want to call it. We refer to it as the use of public money for private educations. And given the real changes in the makeup of the House, it is a chamber that is now much more friendly towards school voucher legislation, and I think your chamber was already very friendly towards it. So are you preparing for the passage of a school voucher bill in the next session?
Based on the numbers that we've reviewed, it appears that the governor has the numbers that he needs to pass his the new voucher name, I think, is the Education Savings Account, is what they determined the name last session. $8,000 coupon that some parents would get if they were lucky enough to have their kid win the lottery. Last session, the number was $500 million they were going to put into that. I don't know where it goes from there. I mean, Arizona has seen that it's created a major budget deficit because theirs has grown exponentially. It's become like a universal program. And I'm not sure that people don't understand if and when they voted for candidates based on their position on vouchers. I'm not sure if they understand. This doesn't mean that you just get to show up someday and say, "Hey, I'm not paying my taxes to the school. I want that money back." That's not the way it works, and that's the problem. That I think so many things get oversimplified, and people aren't told the truth. They're not told exactly how things work, and so. But by the same token, last session, we increased the school safety allotment by 28 cents. 28 cents to $10 a kid. Based on what we did for the school safety allotment, the state is paying about 10% of the cost for school districts to keep their kids safe. 10%. So if you live in an older district that doesn't have the modern vestibules where you can lock out a bad guy with bulletproof glass and doors, then your kids are potentially at risk. We had a $32 billion budget surplus, and we've spent nearly $20 billion on the border, but we can't keep our kids safe in our public schools. Do you see where the breakdown is? To me, logically, there's a breakdown in our priorities.
Is there, I mean, it sounds like you are preparing for the passage of some type of school voucher legislation. Is there any version of school voucher legislation that you, Senator José Menéndez, would be able to get behind?
I can't envision that universe, but if somehow the state were to say, you know what, y'all are right, we have underfunded our schools. We're going to fully fund enrollment-based, every school, what they need. We're going to provide 100% of their safety budget. We're going to provide the things they need to keep kids safe, to give teachers and all the professionals that work in the school, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, nurses, counselors, the raises they deserve, they've been working for. We're going to stop the bleeding and make sure that kids have the best master teachers, that they have the best of they think in a public school. And maybe we even create full-day universal pre-K in Texas. If we do those things, if we did all of that, possibly, maybe then I'd say, well, you know what, we've got a public school system we can be proud of, but I don't even understand the purpose of it because school choice is there. They have magnet schools inside school districts. They have charter schools inside our community, some across the street from other ones. They have a variety of choices already there. So I'm not understanding why we want to just create a coupon, a discount for people. And in other states, it's proven that 90% of the kids using these vouchers, they were already attending the private schools. So what is the policy purpose? What are we fixing? So if they can explain that to me, maybe I can get on.
It sounds like a big wish list even for your for that dream scenario. I think sort of what we're looking at again is sort of some type of school voucher, school choice legislation, and then also teacher pay raises, right? How do you navigate trying to get the teacher pay raises, which it sounds like is something that you want, obviously, with having to deal with school voucher legislation, which is something that you clearly do not want? And that was the challenge last time around as well for Democrats and some of these rural Republicans who got taken out in the primaries.
Yeah, no, that was the pay raises were held hostage by putting the voucher into the same bill. So basically, if you're going to vote for, if you want a pay raise, you need to vote for the voucher. Basically, I mean that was the scenario we were presented. I think that it's much easier to explain to people why you voted against something than to explain why you voted for something. And so I think if you stay true to your principles, and if your principles are, you said it yourself, regardless of what name they call it, it is public tax dollars going to private institutions. That's basically bottom line. How do we justify that? How do we justify it when we haven't fully funded our schools, where we have schools where the average in Texas is one licensed counselor per 800 students? Where in Bexar County, the suicide rate amongst our teens has tripled in the last 10 years. We're just not meeting the basic necessities of our community at the basic level. So there's I don't understand how me voting to take resources out of an already underfunded system to reallocate them here just because I want to see a pay raise, how that makes sense. So I don't see myself getting there.
We want to talk about higher education as well. One of the big things that happened last session was SB 17, the DEI ban. And I want to talk a little bit about the impact that has had on higher education. We've seen the pulling of scholarships for affinity groups. And the Dallas Morning News had some great articles about this earlier this year, where it was even basketball, very specific things like basketball players from rural counties in certain places, and colleges and universities had to get rid of those because they felt that it put them on the wrong side of the DEI legislation that the legislature passed. We're seeing also sort of the wiping of some of the terms that some diversity centers at higher education institutions have seen. What are you hearing about the effects of the DEI ban, and what impact do you think that is having on students?
I'm hearing that it's getting more difficult to recruit faculty members to the state. Hearing that also some of our best and brightest are choosing to leave the state, whether they be faculty or students. I think that for some of us, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know myself, and when you're 18, you don't know exactly the reasons why they're making decisions, but I recall institutions of higher education recruiting minorities who were doing well in school. Them coming by our high school and talking to us, and so I believe that we are going to do ourselves a disservice if we don't adjust this. But I don't envision it's going to get adjusted. I think it's one of those things. It's not until we feel the pain that it's going to change, and I just don't understand the reason for the fear of diversity or equity or inclusion. What's so scary about the words diversity, equity, and inclusion? I don't understand that. I don't understand what the concern is, but I know my sister-in-law is in administration at Clemson University. She's now the dean at University of Wisconsin, and she's saying that high-level faculty talk about, how the state of Texas doesn't seem to be welcoming to diverse faculty. It just feels that way, whether it's true or not. So I think it's going to have an impact on our state. I hope I'm wrong. That's another one of those. I hope I'm wrong. I hope people can see past it. But I feel as if there was just recently they just had a Senate higher ed committee, and I think they were asking some of the medical professionals why did there have to be a need for special programs in the health professions for people of Hispanic or African American descent, as if we don't understand the propensity for diabetes and hypertension in those communities. So I hope that the science of things can win out the day. But I mean, if you really believe that you shouldn't try to help people because it only impacts a certain group, I mean, that's kind of frightening. It's a little dystopian.
I mean, what do you think it does also? We talked about a little bit about the impact on faculty and recruitment, but the impact on students and also on the workforce. I mean, we're here in San Antonio, a majority-minority city. The state is getting more and more diverse, and I know that for a lot of people, a lot of these pathways are the ways that they get into universities and higher education and the way for them to stay in higher education. So what do you think this does for just the preparedness of the workforce as well? Because I think it's all well and good if people want to, well, let me take that back. I don't know if it's all well and good for people to say, well, one group shouldn't get, all these things that they complain about with DEI. But I think there is sort of the argument that these are pathways for people who are underrepresented in higher education to get to higher education, stay in higher education, and then go on into the workforce. As we get more diverse, how will that impact us, do you think?
This isn't the first time we've dealt with subtle racism in the state of Texas, or not so subtle. When we had to bring diversity, when we were working on bringing diversity into our top two institutions in terms of the two that we had tier one institutions at the time, A&M and UT, they came up with the top 10% rule. The top 10% rule at the time, if you were in the top 10% of your graduating class, you got automatic admission to UT and A&M, right? All of that's been scaled back and pared down. I think now it's like you have to be in the top 6% or something to that effect. That legislation created opportunities for diversity because that top 10% was applicable in the Valley as much as it was in El Paso, as much as it was in the Panhandle or East Texas. I think, therefore, communities like ours here, people will comply with what the law is or isn't. They're going to comply with it, but it's not going to change the heart of how we serve and how we respect and how we treat each other. So some folks in Austin can get as right-wing and red meat and anti-diversity as they want to be, but we have to embrace who we are. It doesn't change who we are here. And it doesn't change who our demographics, what our demographics are. And I think if they want to, I don't know how they grow this influence or this voting electorate that they've gained if they try to turn their backs on the community that has somewhat helped them get over the top. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I tell you, I'm confident in the leadership of institutions in communities like ours here in San Antonio that we're not going to turn our backs on people by any stretch of the imagination. We're going to continue to do what it takes to help people. We'll just change the dynamics to make it to where if your family earns less than so much that you can have access to higher education. We're going to find ways to make a promise to our community that you will still have a pathway to higher education.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes before we'll start taking questions, but I did want to ask you about sort of going back to the legislature in the next session. What do you see as the dynamics between the House and the Senate? Obviously, the House is coming back as more conservative. The leaders, or the current leaders, I should say, of the chambers are very much at odds. I don't know if you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, but I don't think in my time covering the legislature I've seen the leaders of the chambers at such odds. And I was around for the Strauss years, so they were certainly at odds before. But how do you see the dynamics, and how do you continue to try to work with each other to actually pass legislation when the leaders of the chambers are clearly so dead set against each other? And it's not even just the speaker, but some of the lieutenants as well are unhappy with each other.
Every session's different, right? Every session has its own dynamics, relationships. Texas is a place where, the range in terms of the bill passage rate can be as low as 10% to as high as 20%, and averages in that 15 to 20% that bill passage rate, where you've thousands of bills filed, and at the end of the day, you only have maybe 1,200, 2,000 bills tops pass. So that's not new. Animosity in the past, I think we've been very professional, regardless of what our personal feelings are or aren't. I think that you'll still see a degree of professionalism. I think there's been a decline in civility overall in politics that I've seen starting probably in about 2016, where people started to feel like you could say anything and it was okay to say anything. In the past, you would be much more cautious and polite about how you said things. I hope that because the 181 legislators, 150 House members, and 31 senators, I hope that because we recognize that we represent 31 million Texans. So of the million or so people that live in my Senate district, I'm well aware of the fact that very few, not all of them voted for me. Very few actually turned out to vote, and they voted. But that doesn't mean I don't represent all of them. I represent all of them, whether they see themselves as very far right conservatives or very left wing liberals, and therefore I have to. I think of myself having to go and hold myself to a standard of decorum and professionalism that would make any of them proud, whether they agree or not. Whether we agree or not on the politics, that's completely different. So I hope that we will continue to espouse to have some civility and to be professional, regardless of what our policy differences are. We need to talk, but the good news is this. The Senate and the House only have to pass constitutionally one bill, and that's the budget. After that, we're not required to pass any other bills. And so, based on the makeup of the current Senate and House, if we pass one bill, I think it's a good session.
I think we're gonna start lining up to take questions over here, but I did want to get in one more question. Given the makeup of the legislature, I think it's fair to say we should expect a much more conservative session coming up, correct?
Yes, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot more to it. It's the most conservative probably we've ever seen it.
Okay. Questions?
Yeah, just a reminder, we have about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. We have some folks already lined up. 1, 2, 3, 4, probably last questions. Yours is going to be the last here. But with so many in line, just a reminder to have your questions be concise and with a question mark at the end. And we also have some questions coming in from online as well. So I'll start there and then we'll get to our in-person audience. Linda from San Antonio asks, my concern is separation between church and state with Texas moving to infuse Bible-based lessons in public schools. What can be done to keep the separation of church and state since we have many religions, not just Bible-based?
100% agree. Taxpayers' dollars, the $32 billion, come from expenditures of a myriad, millions of different Texans. and most of them have different religious views, political views, and we should respect all of them and not expect to be putting dollars to the benefit of any one faith or any one religion or any one group. We should be respectful, and we should be, as a government, just taking care of the basic necessities, and regardless of not trying to advance any one group because of the fact that these are taxpayer dollars, and that's what we should be respect. We are, at the end of the day, we should be good fiscal stewards of the taxpayer dollar, not think that it's our money that we can dictate how it's spent.
Thank you. Hello. Now, my name is Randy Lee from Austin. Senator, first off, the people of San Antonio do not know, or maybe you do know, how lucky you are to have this gentleman representing you. I have two quick questions, and you don't have to answer one of them. When are you running for governor? And two, this is more of a process question because I've seen you on the Senate floor. This is one of the best debaters on the Senate floor, well-spoken. And that's not just coming from me because I listen to a lot of people. Any issue, whether he's going to lose it or win it, he is well-spoken. When you have a bill or an amendment and it's close in your mind in terms of the vote, how do you approach getting enough votes to get to that 16 number? I know that doesn't happen often because it's already predetermined in most cases, but there's got to be a philosophy of your strategy of bringing those from all political persuasions to your side of the amendment or the bill. How do you approach it?
Well, it doesn't happen on the floor. First of all, thanks for your compliments, much too generous and undeserved, and you got to ask my wife first about running for any other offices. Reality is that before we present any bill or any legislation, I mean, before it comes up on the Senate floor, typically we don't waste the Senate's time unless we know we have votes to pass a bill. Sometimes there are close amendments, sometimes they're not. Look, at the end of the day, it's like anything in life. You just have to talk to people, and you gotta show them why the policy that's going to be advanced in this bill makes sense or doesn't make sense. I mean, at the end of the day, there's no magic formula. Is this something that makes sense for people or doesn't make sense? It's been blessed to pass bills like cyberbullying, David's Law, and other bills that just make a lot of sense for folks. Yes, ma'am.
Senator, one of the results of the November election was that the Senate District 27 was flipped. And I just wanted to know if you'd comment on that, not just in terms of numbers, but also just in terms of mood. Does that feel disheartening?
Senator Morgan Lamantia was one of the brightest young legislators I had met in a long time. Great heart, educated at St. Mary's Law School. You know, sometimes I'd say to her, "Hey, you know what? This vote might hurt you in your reelection back home." And I can remember as a voice, she's like, "No, but it's not right." And she'd say, "You know, I'm going to do what's right." I don't know the gentleman who beat her. I hope he brings a heart of service. He's got some very big heels to fill, and we're going to miss her. She was a wonderful, a great public servant in the one session that she served, and we hope to continue to work with her in some capacity.
Allison, let's see here. Give me 1 second. Allison from San Antonio asks, it's been almost 150 years since the number of Texas state senators increased from 20 to 31, with 30 million people now calling Texas home, and only 31 state senators. Each senator represents close to 1 million constituents. Is it time to increase the number of state senators in Texas?
I think that makes sense. I mean, our districts are currently larger than a congressional district. It makes it somewhat difficult to try to serve all of the constituents. We do our best. We have a great staff. I mean, any elected official who tells you or thinks that they can serve their community without a great staff is either not a good elected official or sadly mistaken. And we have a terrific team, and couldn't do it without them. But yeah, I think it would be a welcome to try to right size. I don't envision that happening anytime, but I think that is a good observation. I mean, put that right up there with independent redistricting commissions and getting rid of the electoral college, and it's a trifecta.
Good afternoon. My name is Melina Espiritu Azocar. I am the very proud president of Northside AFT. We are the union that represents the employees of Northside ISD, which is the largest district here in the San Antonio area. Our members alongside us helped fight off 5 special sessions of vouchers. Particularly, it was very heartbreaking on election night for House District 118 and 121 for us as we tirelessly fought alongside those 2 candidates in our fight to keep vouchers at bay from Texas. So it's a very challenging time for us as we go into the special session in January. Our members need support. They need help. They can't purchase paper, and there's not resources for students. My question is, how do we find the hope for them? When we hear that legislators, that if you step in and say you're against vouchers, they don't even want to talk to you. Where's the hope in this upcoming session? How do we explain and talk to these teachers and support staff about how they can have these conversations with folks and let them know that we continue to be against vouchers and will be against vouchers?
I think the most important thing, well, first of all, let me thank you for your hard work and thank you for everything y'all have done. And what I like the most, too, is how you talk about how you represent all the school employees. Because in my conversations over the years, new legislators and sometimes parents you only think of because, the primary interaction with any parent of a student is the teacher. But there are so many people in that school that school can't run without. In many cases, is those bus drivers, the custodians, the cafeteria workers, the nurses, the counselors, the librarians. All of these people make up the ecosystem that is required to have a good, healthy school. The coaches, I forgot about the coaches, and so many kids only go to school because they want to play sports. The rest of the time they're bored and they don't want to be there. And sometimes you just have to wait till you get to that kid. So you asked the question, how do we keep hope? I think the best thing we can do is to empower people. We need to teach them how they can follow the legislature. And there are more tools than ever now to watch daily activities, to listen in the background. You can have it on your phone in the background. You can hear committees. You can hear the dialogue. You can hear real time. I can remember back in the early days, legislators would literally talk about the fact that they were going to do whatever the heck they wanted to do on the House floor because their constituents wouldn't read about it until months later. That's not the case anymore. Everything's real time. And so I think a lot of people are watching. I think a lot of people with a financial interest watch the legislature as if it were a sport. And I think we need to start empowering and getting the members of the school district, the employees, to think of the schools as if these are of the legislature. This is how they're paid. This is where the pay raise isn't just the superintendent and the school board making the decision. They can't even decide unless the legislature gives them more resources. So they need to be watching and listening. And because I tell people, don't judge people on their words. Anybody can give a good speech. Anybody can read a good speech. There's lots of actors and actresses that do great on TV. It's the deciphering when they present you look, I'm gonna take this really terrible thing and I'm gonna encase it in this awesome cake and icing around and make it look real pretty. But inside there, you still have that terrible thing. And that you need legislators that can say, you know what, that's a beautiful cake, but I'm not going to take that to my constituents when I know it's got something terrible, it's rotten on the inside. And so that they need to know that because they need to ask, they need to understand, because sometimes other people take advantage of the fact they go, well, we presented a bill with a pay raise. We gave them the bill, and they still voted against it. That's what they try to do. That's how they get us. They try to fool the electorate by saying your legislator voted against your interests because they voted against that pay raise, even though it was stuck inside a big voucher bill.
We have a few minutes left, and this will be our last question.
Hello, Senator. My name is Matthew Tovar. So I'm a proud product of both the Northside ISD and Northeast ISD music programs. And as a musician, I wanted to know if during this last, the filing period that just passed, if you had filed any bills to address how, I'll say how catastrophically underfunded our music programs are in our public schools, especially now with vouchers seeming like a much more real reality now with this upcoming session.
So thank you, Matthew. Once again, and thank you for the hard work you've done as a very young person. You've been working hard. You worked hard over the electoral process. Sorry things didn't work out the way they did, and you've been an advocate for more money and investment in music education. Here's the list of the bills we filed so far. I don't have them memorized. I think they're about 80, but these are the bills that we've received back. So it may not be on here, but I'll get with you afterwards. I'll tell you what I have in education. Special education service-based intensity funding. Currently, we fund a special ed child just because the same, whether their needs for treatment or therapy are very low on the spectrum or very high, they all get funded the same instead of based on the needs that they have. We'd like to see that changed. Bilingual training and monitoring. We've got safe feeding and swallowing plans. Let's see what else we have in here. Mixed status Medicaid outreach. Special ed liaisons, substitute teacher. It's how do I put this, Bill? One of the hardest days I've had professionally in my life is the one day I actually spent in the classroom. Seriously, you can't have your phone with you. You would die, Robert Puente. You can't have your phone. Yeah, your phone, literally, you can't look at it. They make you leave it, and so you're in front of the class. They just run students through your classroom, and then the one class that you have to take the lunch, you got like 10 minutes to get them down there. You got to get them in line. Then you got to eat in 5 minutes, and it was literally the hardest day I've ever had. I came back, I was exhausted, and I was like, I felt bad. I was like, wow. And then I filed a bill. I say every legislator should be a substitute teacher, at least one day. Yeah. You know, I think it's one of those things. Universal pre-K. Matthew, I don't know. I've got DEI, right to report, requiring colleges to provide students information about how they can report incidents of discrimination. Yeah. We're not going to give up. We're going to still file safe school water plan, autism supplement, free course credit in case you take courses. You got higher ed courses, they should transfer. If they don't transfer, the school needs to pay for your course. Class rank disclosures. We don't have the music ed one back yet, buddy, but when we do, we'll file it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you all for coming to the conversation. That's the end of our program. Thank you so much.